This is a podcast from comedianscomedian.com.
This is the Comedian's Comedian podcast. Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Stuart Goldsmith, and this is the brilliant, the absolutely wonderful Angela Barnes, who, as we allude to in this conversation, Angela was an early guest on this show, and I decided not to release the episode because basically her kind of zero to hero story was she had such an incredible start to her career that I worried that no one would learn from it. And so we've sort of made a mutual decision at the time. I mean, basically it was like, I started writing jokes, I turned out to be brilliant at it, knew loads about comedy, smashed all the competitions, started getting work straight away. And I thought it's going to be a bit, probably a bit painful for lots of people starting out who may be listening. And also I thought it would be better to talk to her when she was in a position to look back on a body of work and reflect upon it. I'm very pleased I waited. This is a really excellent conversation. It's got all your classic Comedian's Comedian podcast stuff in it. She's very, very hard. She's very hard worker. She's very disciplined, a tremendous work ethic, and as you'll be pleased to know, it turns out a lot of that is based in her anxiety and fear of failure. Mwah! Vintage stuff. So without further ado, this is the absolutely brilliant Angela Barnes. God, slick was my timeout adjective.
Really?
Was that a thing when you started? Time Out used to give you an adjective and it would hang around every time your name was mentioned in Time Out in the comedy section in the listing.
It'd be the same.
Yeah.
The only time I've been mentioned in Time Out, they have used an adjective, which really, I don't think summed me up very well at all. It was cosy.
Cosy?
Yeah, which I was really shocked by.
That's a damning with faint praise. It's not even praise, is it?
No.
But it's also inapplicable to you.
I wouldn't.
You're not
I don't
a cosy
think I'm
stand-up.
a
You're a
stand.
relentless joke machine.
Like, even if... Well, thank you. But I'll take that over cosy.
Yeah, that's it, right.
But even, someone like Josie Long, you might say cosy because she wears cardigans, maybe, or something. But even that's not right. But
I can't really think of a
who's
cosy
a
comedian.
Cozy?
Someone
Barbara
like...
Nice? But that's just the image. She's not. She's the opposite of cosy.
Yeah,
but
and even someone like Lucy Porter, who is kind of sweet. The whole point is it's sweet,
it's
and then
spiky.
there's a barb.
Yeah.
Cosy. God, I hope I'm not cosy. That's the worst.
I know. I really was just like, what the fuck does that mean?
I was very early days, and I was quite pleased to get an adjective early on.
Yeah, slick's a good one.
10 years ago. Well, I used to get slick. Yeah, I never wanted to be slick. But then slick for me became something that, and I'm actively trying to undo it now and be more flappy and deliberately sort of undo the slickness. I can see now what they were talking about because I'd go, I'm not slick, and anyway, I can't be thinking about this now because I have to get this exactly right. Well, maybe that's what I mean. So you're not cosy. Give yourself a timeout adjective. That's a good starting point. What would you hope for, and what would you give yourself?
Okay, I would hope for. That's a tricky one, isn't it? Competent. I've got very low self-esteem, Stu. The one I'd probably give myself is again one that I hear quite a lot, and that's world weary, and I quite like that because there's
sneaky hyphenation.
That sort of self-deprecating world weary. That's the thing I get a lot.
Yeah,
I've had brash a couple of times, which I'm not sure that's.
Would you be happier about brash?
I'm happier with brash than cosy, I think. Because
why do you think they say brash?
I don't know. Maybe because I'm a woman who swears. I don't know.
Right. That's a comedy equivalent of that kind of like bossy, that kind of
exactly.
gendered...
It's like she's a woman with a foul. I get called potty mouth. And I don't swear that. I'm not like a blue act. Do you know what I mean? I don't do much.
So I think Milliken gets the same thing, doesn't she? People really make a big deal of the fact that she occasionally will swear.
And we'll talk about sex sort of semi-graphically, not that graphically.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
certainly not compared to some, any one of 100 male comics doing a cock mime with the microphone.
I can't think of a single male comic who has never mentioned his penis on stage ever. Whereas we, as soon as you mention that you even have sex as a woman, it's slightly naughty. Why? Right. We're just doing what everyone else does.
Yeah. Okay. We might get into more of that in a bit. So world weary. Do you think that's?
I quite like that in a way, because I don't think I am as a person world weary. Like I'm quite aware of things going on. I'm quite. In my own life, I'm quite sort of politically active. I'm a member of the Labour Party. I'm quite aware of the world, and it makes me weary. But I'm not a particularly political comic. Like I do topical stuff sometimes, but I try to. My comedy, I find it very difficult to be funny about things I'm angry about.
Yes.
You know, so I mean, I look at people like Mark Steele in awe because he's angry and hilarious. Whereas when I'm angry, it's just a rant. I forget that it has to be a punchline, you know, if I'm angry.
Is that because your jokes are, or that you as a comic are preoccupied with funny more than you're preoccupied with getting it off your chest?
I think so, yeah. I think so. And I think for me, for my comic persona, whatever that may be, that I do anger, but the comedy comes from being angry at inane things rather than things I'm actually angry at.
Yes.
You know, the comedy comes from being angry because, you know, I'm 40 and people think I should have a kid, or, you know, or those things that you know, aren't really worth getting angry about.
They aren't worth getting angry about, but you do get angry about them. Do you get really angry about them? And are you using it on stage as a sort of a cathartic means of expressing stuff? Or is it simply that you're like, oh, here's a bit of grit, let's try and turn that into a pearl?
I think it's a bit of both. I think sometimes there's a bit of grit, let's see what we can do with that. Oh, this is a silly thing to get angry about, let's see what happens when you get angry about it. Sometimes it's something that does actually annoy me, but I know in my head that it's, you know, you should pick your battles and it's not worth getting wound up about. But on stage, I can get wound up about it and it's funny. Okay.
I'm just wondering, that's really interesting that you mentioned Mark Steele, who I think definitely is, like, he is that brilliant combination of he's genuinely annoyed, he's done the reading, and he's really funny.
Absolutely.
And that's fearsome. You know, that's
I'm
great.
in awe of that. I'm absolutely in awe of it because I was lucky. I get to spend quite a lot of time we've got the same agent. And so when it's Edinburgh time, we preview together quite a lot. So I spent a lot of time in cars with Mark. And that's just how Mark is.
Yeah.
You know, when he is angry, he's funny. It's funny watching Mark be angry.
That's interesting. Yes, okay.
And that's but then to put that on stage is a whole other skill.
Oh, what I found in the show that I did at Edinburgh last that I'm about to tour is there's a lot of it that is more kind of I'm angrier in it. It's by no means political. That stuff is sort of post-Brexit starting to happen a little bit.
Yeah.
I think we're going to see a lot more.
Oh, there are people who have never mentioned politics on stage before doing material about.
Yes.
I mean, I do topical stuff because I do topical shows. Like I do Mock the Week occasionally, I do News Quiz on Radio 4, things like that. So I have to be generating topical, but so I'll do things that are topical, but I wouldn't say that I'm particularly political.
Yes. Okay.
In that I know what my politics are. I wouldn't necessarily think somebody who's watched me at a gig would know what my politics are necessarily.
Yes. Okay. Well, what I was going to ask was, or the analogy I was going to draw was that for my stuff at the moment, or the current touring show, I'm angry. I'm angry because I have had to leave London against my will. That's one of the threads of the show.
Right, yeah.
And I know that for me, I walk around being angry that I've had to leave London against my will. Like it genuinely, it wasn't an easy show to write by any means, but I had a thing. I had the tiger by the tail. I was like, I have to talk about this because I'm bloody waking up worrying about it and being annoyed about it.
If that's consuming your days, how can you not write about it?
It really was, exactly. So I suppose when it comes to kind of political stuff, and I suppose this is this question I'm putting to you rather than to myself, which is the ivory,
that's why you started this podcast.
Ivory tower afforded me by the podcast, is that if you are a political person but your stuff on stage is about silly anger that you can make comedy out of, does that mean that you aren't walking around all the time annoyed about politics in the way that, say, Mark Steele might be?
I don't think it does, because I mean, this year, 2016, and you know, obviously people are going to bang on about this for a long time, but we all know it's been a year. It's been a year of upheaval and terrifying, frightening stuff. And what's happened in America, what's happening in Europe with the rise of the far right, it genuinely keeps me awake at night and makes me anxious. And actually, I think maybe because of that, some of that is starting to leak into the material that I do. Like, you can't ignore the fact that Donald Trump's been elected president. Now, we're in a situation where it's a bit tricky because you don't want to be a situation where you go to a comedy club and that's all that everyone's talking about on stage. Because sometimes you go to a comedy club and you want to forget the realities of what's going on out there. So I feel sort of torn between my responsibilities to make people forget what's going on and also to satirise what's going on.
Yes.
Because if we don't laugh about it, we don't satirise it, and we don't point out its failings, then what do we do? All of us feel powerless at the moment. I think there's a lot of that feeling, you know, I don't know what else to do. You know, I don't know what's in my power to do. And as a comic, you could argue, well, one of your powers is to satirise what's going on or to look at it. But on the other side of that, sometimes people just don't want to remember what's going on when they're sat in a comedy club. And I think that, again, can be a difference between doing your own show and doing a gig on the circuit. Like in my own solo shows, in my preview, I will talk more about that sort of thing than I will in a 20-minute set in a comedy club. In a 20-minute set in a comedy club at the moment, I might mention Brexit and do some jokes about it, but they'll be very... the jokes I do in comedy clubs about Brexit aren't pro-Remain, which I am. Mm-hmm. But because I don't feel that's the space for that. If I was doing my own solo show, people who bought tickets to see my show, then I feel like, well, that's where I can explore my feelings more about this stuff.
Okay. So so it's out of a kind of a respect for the other side's opinion that there might, or is it simply that why is that you would kind of conceal your feelings and adopt a more neutral position?
It depends how you read into it, because I suppose, I'm just trying to think of the jokes that I do. I suppose you would see that there's a bit of tongue in cheek and that I probably am pro-Remain. I guess that's, but what I don't want to do is go on stage in a comedy club and lecture people about what I think they should have voted. I don't think that's...
Sure.
So I guess my political stance is obvious from some of the things I say, but my primary goal in that setting, in a comedy club on a Friday, Saturday night, is to make punters laugh. That's what I'm being paid to do. That's what I'm there to do, not to start a rally, not to kind of, be overtly political. Some comics do it brilliantly. Mark Steele could do that because the audience already know him. They know what his thing is. They know what his political leanings are. And it almost doesn't matter if they're the same as theirs or not. You can laugh with Mark Steele, whereas I am much more about, I think in a comedy club setting, much more about the sort of minutiae of life rather than the big stuff.
Well, we gigged together recently at Old Rope, and for me, I made some notes at the time, so I didn't want to forget any of it, but the joke that I don't need to look at my notes to remember is the one about Farage going to America and offering to be an ambassador for the UK.
Yeah.
A man, and the structure of the joke, and I'll butcher it here, is that, so you established that, and then you said that's a man doing a job he isn't wanted to do. He's like one of those guys that wash your windows at the lights.
Yeah.
Which I think is, it's such a strong joke. It's one of those ones where the audience, they almost rock back. They're like, yeah, that's great. You said the thing. It all makes sense. The planets align. Mwah, mwah. Beautiful joke. So with something like that, do you think it's fairly obvious from that joke your distaste for Farage?
Absolutely. But I think Farage is a figure of, like, even, there's a small minority. I don't believe that everybody who voted Leave is a supporter of Nigel Farage.
Sure.
Right. So therefore, there's a difference between that split of 48%, 52% and people who think Farage is a clown and people who don't. Right. So I think Farage is sort of fair game, because the things he does are ridiculous. So I obviously it's obvious the way I'm going to talk about him, the way, and Donald Trump the same. You can't ignore the ridiculousness of it. You can't ignore that he's a reality TV entrepreneur. He's now the president of the United States. That's inherently, come on. I can't pretend to be fine with that. So there are certain lines that can be drawn.
I'm wondering, I suppose I was sort of asking, do you feel as a satirist that to a certain extent you have to take a neutral position so that you can make fun of both sides? Like, I think I often hear that in comedy, that people go, I don't want the audience to know which way I vote because my position has to be able to lacerate both sides.
Yeah.
I'm wondering at the moment whether, are we hearing you lacerate both sides, or are we actually, it's kind of clear where you're coming from because of the targets you choose?
But I think often in satire, what you're actually doing is you're satirising whoever has the most power at that point. Like, one of my heroes is Linda Smith, and she was a socialist her whole life. But the thing that she said, and she would always do, was be to take the piss out of whoever's in power, be that Labour or Conservative, whoever. If you're in a position of power, that's where you are fair game for satire, if you know what I mean. And Nigel Farage, okay, not exactly in a position of, well, we like to think he's not in a position of power, but
Christ, anything could happen.
Right now he seems to be, it doesn't matter whether he's been elected into a position of power, he seems to just be taking it for himself. And so therefore, fair game, I think. And if Jeremy Corbyn was leader, I would be, was Prime Minister, if that were to happen, I would satirise him equally, I think.
What would you? Because if you're a Labour voter, you're a member of the Labour Party,
I am.
And you're like, would you simply not regard yourself as having to do that job? Like, might you find other jokes funnier, other of your own jokes?
Maybe. I'd have to be in that position to. the Tories were in power when I started comedy. So I don't, I don't know how I would. But I do think that whoever is in a position of power, their powers are limited. There's never going to be a perfect prime minister. That's never going to happen. So therefore, they're there to be questioned and satirised as much as anyone else.
You're one of those people who, like Kevin Bridges, when Kevin Bridges did So You Think You're Funny in 2005, whenever we did it, everyone looked at him and went, oh, you've been doing comedy for 30 years somehow. Do you know what I mean? But you haven't. You're brand new. But then you have this quality. And I think you had that quality as well. It was like, here is the fully formed package. Here is a hard-working joke writer who knows what she wants to talk about.
Thank you. Well, so I was 33 when I did my first open spot. So I think that makes a bit of a difference. And I'd been a comedy fan my whole life. So I'd absorbed that sort of language of stand-up by osmosis, I think, my whole life.
Yes, but so had I. I started late and I've been a comedy fan forever. I don't think absorbing... There'll be a lot of people listening to this who are like, oh, I've been a comedy fan for years and years. Doesn't mean they're going to be a joke writer. I just want to push you a bit harder
it's so funny. It's so funny hearing you say, because you never know how other people perceive what you are as an actor or. And I know from me writing my material that stuff comes kicking and scream. I have to yank it out with pliers. It doesn't come easily, right? I find a
wonderfully mixed metaphor. It comes kicking and screaming like a baby, which I have to yank out with pliers.
I was a forceps birth, so I know the process I go through with writing. I know the ups and downs of it. I know the amount of stuff. Like I have to write 100 pages to get a page of anything that I would say out loud on a stage. So I don't feel like I'm a tight joke writer. But I think what I am maybe is quite strict with myself. What I'm not, I know what my strengths are and what they're not. So I am not an improviser. I'm not somebody who can have a germ of an idea and go, I'll work this out on stage. And I know there's a lot of comics who can do that, but I don't trust my brain enough to do that. And one day I'd like to just give that a try and see if it does work, because I know that does for some people.
And you can play a panel game and you can chip in and you can build on things. I mean, maybe you are an improviser.
Maybe I am, but I just got in my head that I'm not. And my brain is my own worst enemy. And I think a lot of us can say that. But in terms of writing and performing, I am my own worst critic. And my brain is constantly, every day, telling me, who the hell do you think you are? Right? You used to have a proper job. What are you doing? This isn't your job. This isn't what you do.
And you're able, and believe you me, we'll get into that.
Yeah.
But you are able to process that as discipline. Whereas I think some people might experience that kind of, like you've mentioned, self-esteem. We'll talk about mental health.
Yeah.
Some people might find that feeling of, I can't do this, means that they become inactive, whereas your feeling of I can't do this means that you work all the hours.
It does both. That I have periods of activity and periods of complete paralysis when it comes to writing, where I think that's it, I'm spent, I can't do it anymore. And I get myself in a cycle of, if you have a day where you just have, or you can't think of anything to write about, or the tyranny of sitting in front of a blank screen or a blank bit of paper, and then I spiral really quickly into, you can't do this, you've fooled everyone this long. And it doesn't matter how much evidence there is, it doesn't matter how many times my agent will go to me, you've just done What a Week, or you've just done this, or you wrote that thing, or I've seen you do loads of new material, what are you talking about, you don't turn over enough. Doesn't matter how many times people show you evidence, your brain, there's that little irrational part of your brain that overrides sometimes. And I can go 3 months without writing a joke, which for a comedian isn't ideal. But what I have to do...
Is that 3 months worth of trying to write a joke, or is that 3 months of despairing inactivity?
It's 2 weeks of trying to write a joke and then 2.5 months of displacement activity.
Looking at fish for jobs online. What else can I do?
I'd say every year since I've been a comedian, I've applied for 6 social work jobs.
No.
Yeah. Never followed it through. But I have periods of time where I go, that's it, game over, done, start applying for social work jobs.
And what it is, do you recognise a regular trigger for those kind of, is it a bad gig? Is it a tough writing session? Is it writer's block? What are the moments that...
Oh, that's an interesting question. I've not really analysed it that fully. I think partly it's my whole life I've had cycles of ups and downs. So the part of it is just part of that. And so I just go with that now. Part of it is I guess if you have a bad gig, or sometimes you can have a bad gig and it doesn't knock you for six. And sometimes you can have one and it really does. And I think it depends where you are mentally at that point anyway in your life, you know. And weirdly, I think what I found is by sorting out other areas of my life. So I'm in a really happy, stable relationship. I love where I live. So by making me focus on the only thing that can balls up at the moment is work. And so by hyper focusing on that, that's when I start stressing myself out and convincing myself I can't do it. You know, and sometimes it's like if you've got issues in other areas, I'm not worried about that because I've got other things to worry about. Now I haven't got other things to worry about. It can really heighten. I'm a mess, Stu. I'm a complete mess.
No, I was smiling because I thought, what a lovely... I feel like I'm in a similar position. Like, you and I have... I think we're emotional roller coaster people.
Yeah.
And I don't know about clinically, but certainly I've spent a lot of money on therapy. More than I never got into kind of treating it with pills. Yeah. But... I think there are similarities between us, and I think also I was smiling because I was thinking, yeah, my life's pretty great in the minute now as well. Sorted relationship, enjoying where I live, all of those things. So yes, it does. So that lets you go, oh, fuck.
Yeah. So what am I going to worry about? This I'm going to worry about.
I'm really interested to hear that you sort of mentioned in an offhand way talking to your agent about it.
Yeah.
Because I wonder about that. I think all comics have different relationships with all agents, all managers.
Yeah.
And I do wonder how much you share. I wonder how, like, I feel pressure to pretend to everyone in the outside world apart from my partner, like including my baby. I have to pretend to my baby that everything is fine.
Yeah.
So you're able to say to your representation, I'm shit, I can't do this.
Well, I probably shouldn't, but I do.
Okay, thank you for admitting that. I think that's really good. And they, like you say, they're in a position where you work hard for them and they know that.
Yeah.
So this is Angela. She's huge fun to talk to, and I hope you enjoy the rest of this episode. I'll let her speak for herself. Just a couple of things. The Ellis James and John Robbins special Soho live show on the 23rd of January is now officially sold out. So terribly sorry if you didn't manage to get any tickets for that. We will be broadcasting that. We might even try and wangle something, whether we can broadcast it or a bit of it, maybe a teaser on their own pod feed that was mooted earlier. Hopefully that will happen. But the show itself is good. Now, listen, I've made leaps and bounds in booking the other Soho dates. I can't tell you, I'm going to do a big launch and tell you who they are, but basically the middle two, the fourth one is June. It's miles away. Don't need to announce that yet, although it's someone I'm very, very pleased to have nabbed. But the middle two, which are February and April, they are, I'm not quite sure which way round they are, so I don't want to mislead you, and until they're completely set in stone, I won't launch them. But suffice to say, at the beginning of February, it's sort of quite soon, I'll do a bit of an onslaught because the February guest is superb. The mooted February guest is absolutely superb, and I'm confident that'll sell very well. So keep an eye on sohotheatre.com, keep an eye on @ComComPod, the Twitter feed for this show, and of course you can join the Facebook group if you're not already a member of that, and that's the best way to send me ideas for questions for forthcoming guests and suggestions for guests. We've had loads of brilliant ones of those recently, and I just realised episode 200 is creeping up on us, and I would like it to be a little bit special. Episode 100 was Phil Kay. Do you remember all those? I mean, it must have been years. It must have been. I certainly don't release more than one a week. So does that mean Phil Kay was 2 years ago? Barely seems like it. Good Lord. Anyway, I won't blather on about that, but I've got someone special in mind, so I hope that I will bring you exciting news of that soon. Penultimate thing, the tour, of course. The tour is almost upon us. I've started doing bits and bobs of PR and press for that, and it starts at the end of this month. If you would like to come and see me live, if you enjoyed an hour, that little giveaway, the Christmas giveaway, then you can come and see me on the tour, and the first few dates are as follows. Beginning of February, in fact, we open on the 3rd of February in Southend at the Joker Comedy Club. It's a brilliant venue, always love playing there. I'm in Poole. Why am I in Poole? Who do I know in Poole? Turns out, my friend Max. Don't know about anyone else. I mean, hopefully some other people are going to come and see me in Poole. Why am I going to Poole? I mean, I love the idea of it. The only thing I know about Poole, and this is apparently a true fact, by which I mean someone told it me once, so I'm repeating it verbatim, is that in Poole, in Dorset, there was an Everything's a Pound shop, and then someone over the road opened an Everything's 99p shop. Shop. Remember when all those were springing up? And the Pound Shop closed in a month. Outrageous. So lots to look forward there. That's the 4th of February in Poole. Next one's after that. Very exciting guest I'm interviewing on the 9th of February. Don't want to give that away until it's completely confirmed. Canterbury. I'm going to the Gulbenkian Theatre in Canterbury, brackets the cafe, on the 10th of February. I'm at the Criterion for Dave's Leicester Comedy Festival, doing the tour show and a work in progress on the 11th of February. I'm doing some very exciting tour supports for someone, although I don't know if I'm allowed to tell you who they are. I'll get back to you with that. Then more tour stuff. I'm in Crawley on the 18th of February, the Hawth Theatre there, which had loads of fun last time, so do come back to that if you came last time or fancy bringing more people. I'm at the Comedia in Brighton, which is just, it's one of the venues in my heart, that one. Lovely show, lovely venue. The Comedia in Brighton on the 19th of February, and then Excess Malarkey in Manchester, which is just one of the... it's just one of the comedy venues. It just routinely wins best comedy venue in the Northwest, I believe. Feel free to get in touch with me if I've got that wrong, but it should do. Amazing show there last year. Please do come along to that one if you're in Manchester. And then, and I've already skipped over the 20th of February, which is the podcast with mystery guest number 1. So that's a Soho Theatre live podcast. Get onto sohotheatre.com, and I'm fairly sure if you can't use the code Vera to get money off, then get in touch with me, because you should be able to do that, as with all of your ticket purchases. And then just to finish off February, I won't go into huge details, but the last day in February, the 28th, I'm in Dublin. I'm in Whelan's. So if you're a listener in Dublin, and I know I've got a few, get yourself along to Whelan's and bring 10 friends. It's selling quite well, but, it could... The best case is always they have to move the gig because it oversells. So I'm going to just keep pushing all of these really hard. Some of them I'm very confident about. Some of them are like, right, I'm in Poole, am I? Okay, well, that'll be interesting. Who knows? Maybe Poole will surprise me. Maybe Poole will turn out to be this year's Hemel. Who knows? I can tell you all the dates of those and all the ones coming up. There's loads of other shows coming up in Harrogate and Birmingham and Bath and Hull and Shrewsbury, Bristol, Warwick, and loads more besides. And then I'm off to Melbourne for a bit, and then I'm back for more tour dates. So loads of those, all available, all of those details and links available at comedianscomedian.com/tour. But you knew that anyway, because all of you had been to comedianscomedian.com/donate to support the show. And thanks, man, men, guys. Oh, no. Wait, listen out for the post-amble. I've got some thoughts on the subject of men and guys. But thanks, man, and thanks, guys, in a non-gendered sense. All of you who've donated over the Christmas period, I'm enormously indebted to. I'm out of debt to. No, I am indebted because I don't owe you the money back. I gave you a thing. We're quits, all right, guys? But I'm very much obliged. I'm very, very grateful for the support of my lovely listeners, and that includes you. If you haven't already made a donation to the podcast to show how much it means, not show, you don't just show anyone, but some people like to donate because they think it's a worthwhile thing, and some people like to donate because they like getting in touch with me and saying hi and I'm into what you're doing, and some people like to donate because they're feeling flush. I hope no one feels forced, but I do hope that everyone who's able to donate, who likes the show and feels it's worth, for example, £2 a month, you can set your own recurring donation, or for example, a one-off £20 donation. I like to think that all the people who do that recognise that they're supporting the show for the people who can't afford to. And once again, if you're a student and you send me a £3 donation, I love it. I'm so grateful for it. Please don't apologise. So many people are like, sorry, I can't get more. You don't need to be sorry. Thanks. I'm really glad you're on board. So that's all of that. You can't buy a t-shirts, as someone called Andrew. You can't buy a t-shirts. That's quite GLC, isn't it? You can't buy a t-shirt, as someone called Andrew found out to his chagrin earlier this week, because they've all sold out. So please don't go on the website and buy them, because I'll only have to refund your money. Don't even do it as a joke in your droves, please, because I've just got to remember to take the t-shirt buying bit off the site. And that is all of that. Check out sohotheatre.com. I can't announce those dates yet, but I think you're going to like them. So jump over to there, use the code Vera for a discount, and come and support the tour, gang. Let's get back to Angela. I'll chat to you briefly at the end, and then we'll have a little post-amble. Back to Angela Barnes.
My late teens, early 20s, through that time, I had a bit of a tumultuous time mental health-wise, right? So since my 30s, I would say, I kind of adopted this tell people how you're feeling strategy, because otherwise they don't know. And I realised that every time I'd got seriously ill was because I hadn't told anybody what was going on, and it get out of hand. So by saying to people, hey, I'm not feeling good at the moment, that means I've put that in someone else's head and they're keeping an eye on me. And that's a strategy that's got me through and it works for me. But the downside of that is I wear my heart on my sleeve, and probably a bit too much. And probably I can say to people, you know, I don't think I'm up to this, to the wrong person, you know, to somebody who doesn't really want to think you're not up to the job they've just booked you for.
Sure.
You know, and I have to remind myself sometimes to, like, come on, you know, confidence has to fake it till you make it. That kind of, I have to have a word with myself with that. Like, you don't feel like you can do this, but this person has booked you to do it because they think you can. And if they think you can, you have to think you can. And, you know, I'm constantly having to have a word with myself about that. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And that whole thing with my agent's brilliant. And the person who looks after me is, I mean, his job in managing me is managing anxiety. And he knows that. And he's really good at it. And he's really good at knowing exactly when to say, should we go for a coffee? And 100%, every time I go for coffee with my agent, afterwards I feel fine. Because he knows what to say. He knows what I need to hear. Yeah. And he can present me what we were talking about before. You know, I can't present myself with the evidence I need. I can't go, well, you did the week and did well on it, or you did news quiz and people liked it and tweeted you about it. I can't, but he can present me with that evidence as an outsider. And I go, oh yeah, that did happen, yeah. And then I feel better. That's never going to come from me. That always has to come from an outsider.
When you say a tumultuous time, as a younger person, I know there are a lot of people listening to this show, and we cover a lot of mental health stuff on it, who really appreciate... There will be people, I think, who are currently having a tumultuous time, perhaps at the age you were. Yeah. So if you want to talk about that a bit more... Yeah,
I'm happy talking about it. It's funny, because people often say, why don't you ever talk about this stuff on stage? And I go, because it's not something I'm particularly... I don't think I can do anything with it that people haven't already done. Like, mental health is a well-covered topic on stage, particularly for comedians, because let's face it, how many comedians do you know?
Even need to finish their sentence.
Right? So it's not like, oh, that's going to be breaking new ground. If you talk about the fact you've had depression, you're like, you know, that I don't feel like it's something that I need to... Like, wait a minute, world, you have to hear this about me. Okay. Because I think it's actually almost a given with most comics, or a lot of comics, or even if it isn't, it's like, have I got anything particular I need to say about it that hasn't been said? I touched upon it in my last Edinburgh show, sort of, but in quite a throwaway way, and I think actually that's more helpful to somebody, the fact that I could do a bit of material and go, while I was in a psychiatric unit, this thing happened. And it's almost like people don't go, wait, you were in a psychiatric unit? The joke wasn't about being in a psychiatric unit. That was a setting for a routine that I needed to do. And I quite like the fact that was throwaway and not the point of
yes,
it.
that also has its own kind of micro catharsis to it, because you're proving to yourself that you can mention it lightly because it's not a big deal. So you're kind of owning it.
Yeah, none of this stuff is secret. It's a secret. Sure. It's just that, you know, if you ask me, I'll tell you.
I'm a big fan of that. I think there are numerous ways to own something, and one of them is to do a big show about it, and one of them is to prove to yourself how fine you are with it by not needing to do a big show about it. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, exactly. I just don't feel like by doing a mental health show, and like I said, my last show touched on those issues, but it was more specific about a more specific thing. Whereas to do the big, you know, this has been my journey with mental health. For a start, I'm bored of it. I have to live it. I'm bored of it, you know. And for me, comedy has saved me in so many ways. And it is cathartic, and it is my outlet, and it is my thing that has helped me overcome some of those obstacles I've had. So I don't want that to be part of it. You know, I don't want it necessarily. And who knows, maybe in 5 years' time, I'll feel like now's the time I want to do my... Sure. Show about that. Never say never.
So coming away from the idea of doing jokes about it, and I appreciate, you know, if you're bored of it, you don't want to kind of get into
like I said, in this, I'm happy to, if it's interesting, I'll talk about it.
Well, I'm interested in it from the perspective of you. Let's talk about it from the perspective of you have used comedy to heal yourself. Let's talk. We can talk about your journey out of it. Yeah. If you tell us briefly what it was, what the symptoms were, because I think actually you're a good example of someone who is managing, and I mean that in a very present, managing and continuing to manage it successfully. Right, yeah. And I feel a bit like that maybe in some way as well. Like I'm like, oh yeah, there's definitely issues there, but I know what things to look out for. I know how to look after myself. And I think that is that's kind of like what's the probably Germans have a word for like mundanely inspiring. Do you know what I mean?
What the or word just is. Getting on with it.
You're just getting on with it,
and it's always there, and it's always so. Like, to cut a very long story short, I first got diagnosed with depression when I was 18. And it was when I went off to university. And I sort of I'd known it was there for a bit before that. And it's very much in my family. And so when I was 18, I first got diagnosed with depression, was first put on antidepressants. Then that diagnosis changed quite quickly to one of bipolar when I had a manic episode in my 20s.
And that was before people were tending to diagnose bipolar.
Yeah. I mean, it was. I mean, it was bipolar affective disorder was the diagnosis I was given, but I didn't know anyone who.
Yeah, it was. It wasn't a thing you could get.
Yeah,
I mean, there was no online
like now
to
you
go
say
on.
it. It's like, oh, I've got that. Oh, me too. You know,
Sure,
and
sure.
it's much more openly discussed now than it was. I mean, I'm talking mid to late 90s. And around the same time, an aunt of mine had quite a serious episode, much more serious than mine. So that focus was, and so I started becoming terrified. That's my future. Is what happened to her is my future. Now, she's a different person with different... Since then, I, touch wood, have never had a manic episode since, but I've had lots of periods of depression and lots of... So I've been on medication since I was 18. I'd say on and off, but much more on than off. And medication from antidepressants to mood stabilisers to quetiapine, which is a mood stabiliser, even like anti-epileptic drugs to try and control certain things. So it's been I always say, like, I feel like I sort of lost my 20s to getting it right, to trying to, you know, it was up and down. The weird thing was, throughout all of this, I was working and I could present quite okay most of the time. I had a psychiatrist once said to me, my biggest problem was I was a good actress.
Yes.
And that I could present as being well when I really wasn't well. And that's where... So that's
it's almost
why,
like a functional alcoholic.
Exactly.
You keep
that.
getting away with damaging
exactly
yourself.
that, because people don't notice that you started drinking vodka in the morning. No, that wasn't my thing,
Sure.
but just to put that out there. But so what would happen is nobody would notice until it got too far to not notice. And then that takes a lot of recovery. So I would have these sort of spells of not working, then go back to work, then spells of not, because it was just learning how to spot the signs. And I was very lucky. I had my best friend who I lived with in London for a long time. She was a mental health occupational therapist. She's a great person to live with.
Yeah.
I mean, the poor girl was never off duty.
That's a winner. That's like getting a flatmate who is training in massage and
exactly,
needs to practice.
right?
Well, this is going to work out.
But I meant this poor girl would have to sort of go, I think maybe you need to, go and see a psychiatrist. I think maybe you need to. But she was great to have that. But then I think, so throughout my 20s, it just felt like that was a period of stabilisation and getting it right. And then by the time I hit 30, I'd sort of got the balance of medication right. I was able to recognise the signs. I was able to, and things started to get a bit more stable in my life, and things. And I'd moved to Brighton. I wanted to go and have a bit of a new start, and then 6 months after I moved to Brighton, my dad died really suddenly, which knocked me for six, because we were best mates. He was my, we were really close. And so again, I had a bit of a rock there, but then I had a reason for it. It felt much more, not easy. I mean, it was a horrible time and I was grieving.
But there's a different kind of sadness, isn't it?
Absolutely different thing when you can pinpoint, and it's normal. It's like, this isn't irrational sadness. You've lost someone you love. That is normal to be that way. And at this time I'd moved to Brighton and I was running a little comedy night in Brighton because I loved comedy, with no intention ever of doing comedy. I never MC'd it or anything. I just booked it and people come and do it. And my dad used to come to the gigs, and it was when my dad died, that was the thing for me that triggered in my head, because he used to say to me all the time, why don't you have a go? I used to do like Amdram and things, so I'd done bits of performance, and why don't you should do it, you love stand-up comedy, why don't you do it? And it was like, no, that's for people who do stand-up comedy, not for social workers. Like, what are you talking about? And then he died, and it was about 9 months after he died, I signed up to do a comedy course. My main reason for doing a comedy course was I knew loads of comedians because I was booking a gig, and I didn't want to get up in front of them and see if I could do it.
Yes, okay. Yeah, that's a really...
I needed a safe space, because if I just rocked up at a open mic night and there were comics I knew in the audience, I would not have got up. So that's why I did a course, really. But the course was great, and I do recommend the course that I did.
Which one did you...
I did the Jill Edwards course at Comedia in Brighton.
Yeah.
And it was brilliant. And that was that, really. And then it was 6 months after I did the course before I did an open spot. And it's funny, Jill, who runs the course, Jill Edwards, she always says this thing about me to her pupils now, because I go back now and talk to do a little Q&A sometimes with the courses that she does now about what it's like being a jobbing comic. And she always says to them, I got where I was going quickly by going slowly. That's the thing, because I was always so anxious about making a fool of myself, or that I wasn't ready to do something, that I would always wait till I was more than ready for doing it. So I wouldn't do my first open spot till I knew I had 5 minutes of material that could work. And then I went out and started gigging that about. And I wouldn't do a 10 until I knew I had 10 minutes that would work. And I would do that by doing different fives.
Which is very contrary, I would say, to what most people do, which is overreach themselves, throw themselves in at the deep end.
Yeah.
Learn
and of course, what happens then, what people then realise is that the comedy world's a small world. If you tell a promoter you've got 10 minutes and actually you've got 7 and you're going to pad it, and then you go and die because you lied, that promoter knows you've lied, then it's going to be 2 years before they give you another shot. Whereas if you go and you do the job they booked you to do and you deliver, you're going to get another gig in 6 months or in a year.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think I managed to go through those early stages quite quickly, was by actually going quite slowly, by not doing anything until I was more than ready to do it.
And is that, in terms of your I hate the word journey, but there it is, in terms of your journey out of the pit, when you said, what was the kind of the therapeutic effect of that on someone who was bereaved, who was already kind of emotionally vulnerable?
It was so powerful because I knew that the most powerful thing about it was, and it's going to sound so cheesy, but it's true, so I'm going to say it, is I knew how proud my dad would have been, because he had said, why don't you do it? Now, that will forever be a sadness that he never got to see me do stand-up. Like, that breaks my heart. And that's why my first Edinburgh show was, I know it's a bit of a trope now to do a dead dad show, but I didn't care, because I was like, I would not be doing this if it wasn't for my dad. He is in this show. And that's why that show means so much to me. And it was a really powerful thing just to, the catharsis of being on stage, the feeling of, it doesn't even matter if you don't smash it or you don't have to, but just not failing at something. When a gig goes well or you don't, when you're an open spot, it's just not dying is a gig going well, right?
That's reminded me of a thing I used to love, or a way of seeing art that I got from my wanky art college, which is that art can either be an artifact to be admired or it can be a tool. And I really think that's one of the great values of stand-up comedy. Sometimes it's Mickey Flanagan doing 40 minutes of the best gig you've ever seen in your life. Yeah. And sometimes it's you working through a thing. Like, any comic will know this who's just been dumped and got on stage that night. Do you know what I mean? And you go, there is a value to it.
As a comic, and it sounds really ruthless, but it isn't. It's a coping mechanism. As a comic, for every terrible thing that happens to you in your life, there's 1% of it is, I can do something with that. And that's a powerful thing, because what it means is, because if you haven't got that outlet, then what do you do with the tragedy in your life? You have to sit with it. How powerful to go, I'm going through a tragic thing at the moment, but at some point in the future, tragedy plus time equals comedy. Some point in the future, this is going to benefit me in some way.
I think we should also say, for the benefit of the non-professional comedian listener, when the tragedy has happened, you don't have to sit with it. You can also talk to other people about it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Please do.
Just seeing as the terms we're talking in this episode might be a favourite of people who are concerned with this subject matter, and let's just remember that's a thing. But certainly, as a comic, what a joy to have, or painting, to have an art, to have any kind of a thing.
And it's funny you mentioned the art thing, actually. This is something I talked about in my last show, because I spent time in day centres and psychiatric units and things, trying to recover from mental illness. And one of the things is art therapy that they try and get you to do. Now, I had a real problem with this, because when I was at school, I couldn't, I was a real high achiever at school. I was moved up a year. I maths and English, brilliant. I had my own spelling test separate from the other kids at school.
Hello.
Yeah, that made me friends. In many ways, I was this high achieving child, but I could not draw or colour in to save my life. And I still can't, right? It's still the thought of it. And I had this teacher once, I was in infant school, so I must have been, 6 or 7, something like that. And I had a friend, Claire, who was really good at drawing. And the teacher me and Claire kept getting told off for talking during this class, right? And at the end, the teacher sort of reached the end of their tether and just went, Claire, I can tell you're not concentrating. Your picture's almost as bad as one of Angela's. Right?
Wow.
I was like 6 or 7, and that really stuck with me. And from that moment, I was like, well, I'm not drawing again. I can't do it. So I would do anything to get out of art classes. And
That's
secondary
like the
school,
awful things you hear about
bunk off.
people. You sing a wrong note, everyone laughs, you never sing again.
Yeah.
No, that's it. That was so
It
important.
was that thing. And I do think that comedy was my art therapy, it's obviously something that I needed, and I can see the value in art therapy, but I always rejected it at the time, because to me, even however many times an art therapist said to me, no one's judging you on this. It doesn't, it can't be a good or bad piece of art. It's you expressing yourself. All I could hear was that, no, I can't do it. I can't do this. And I would stress out to the point where I've sat in the back of an art therapy class doing a cryptic crossword because I just couldn't face getting in there. And I think what comedy did for me at the beginning, certainly, was provide that outlet that art therapy should have provided had I not blocked it in my brain.
But comedy is, it's the opposite, because they are judging you, and it absolutely can be good or bad.
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
I'm using those terms just to investigate specifically what you've said.
Yeah.
There is an argument that says, no, I mean, the comedy as tool argument is like, yeah, maybe the whole audience hated it. Maybe they're not ready for this stuff. Their kids are going to love it.
I can't imagine ever saying that about... I think...
Well, there are comics, Sam Simmons will be brilliant. No one will laugh, and he'll look at them and go, why the fuck you are
You're
laughing?
wrong.
You know what I mean? You're wrong. Exactly.
Yeah. And I admire that, because that is self-belief that I just don't have.
Of course. So, but I'm just saying, in this idea of like comedy being like art therapy, in art therapy there are no wrong moves. Kind of for the comedy you do and I do, there are wrong moves. It can go wrong. And it's instant. So how does that fit into the...
I think I've thought about this a lot. I think what it is that instant feedback is something that feeds something in me. Like, I think I'm a praise addict. And that whole thing with the art therapy was... whatever I did, no one was going to say that's brilliant, so I didn't want to do it.
So what's the point? Yeah, right.
So I didn't want to do it. Whereas at school, I'd come top of the class in maths and English. You're good at this, so I got praise for it. And the point I noticed this was a couple of years ago. I learnt to swim, right? And I went to this swimming class at Crystal Palace. It was like on an art Tuesday afternoon, and I would go there, and it was me and like 4 or 5 other middle-aged women learning to swim, and I had to be better than them. Right. None of us could swim when we started, but I would practice and practice and practice, so that my teacher, Jill, who I loved, right, would say, oh, Angela, that's coming on really well done. And I'd be all like smug, top of the class. And I was like, oh my God, that's who you are. That's exactly who you are. You want praise. That's why you're a comedian and you love it, because that praise is instant. You're not an actor having to wait to read the reviews in a week's time. Yeah. It's instant.
Here's a thought. Do you think that praise addiction was kind of forged in a depressed girl having moments of feeling good?
Yeah, I do. I think that's where I have such low self-worth that's where my self-worth came in, is somebody telling me I'd done something well. I wasn't able to do that. It's like I said before with my agent, but I'm not able to tell myself those things. I need it from an outside influence. And it's pathetic, but that's who I am. I'm 40 now and I've accepted that's who I am. The therapy I've had has probably been quite different to therapy you've had, in that all of mine has been on the NHS, all of it, which means not very much of it. And it also, so I was once part of an experimental group psychotherapy thing at the Maudsley Hospital in South London. So I got this protracted period of group psychotherapy, and I hated every second of it. Now, on reflection, I mean, there were times during it where I thought, this is making me actively worse. Maybe on reflection I got something out of it. I don't know. But it's horses for courses, different things for different people. And I think for somebody with sort of a chronic low self-esteem, sometimes talking about yourself constantly is a difficult thing to do, to try and mine what's going on, because you don't feel you're worth that effort or that time or that person's time. And I very quickly, the other thing is that was sort of helpful and not helpful, is that I was a mental health professional as well.
Yeah.
While all this is going on.
Oh.
So I knew how to present. And the group psychotherapist at the end of it sort of gave us all a kind of report on, and she'd pointed out to me that I hadn't really been aware that I'd doing it. My role in that group was another therapist, essentially. I would deflect anything about me onto someone, Right. So it was kind of helpful working in that field, in that I knew I understood my illness and I understood what was going on, but not so helpful in the way that I also understood the system and how to present and all of that stuff. So I also think part of my getting better was not working with vulnerable people anymore, because I think, the comedy was part of it, but I think also I believe that working in those fields has a shelf life. I believe that it's difficult jobs. Working with people in crisis is difficult when that's your day every day, and all you see is people who are in crisis or struggling, or that can't not rub off on you unless you're a robot, right? So, and I worked with many people in that field who I felt had done it for too long and should have stopped. And I do think part of my getting better and gaining more confidence generally was not doing that work anymore. So not only was it doing comedy, it was taking myself out of work that maybe for somebody with my issues wasn't the ideal setting.
And what do you think about the kind of the long-term implications of your solution, like your professional comedy-based solution to your mental health?
Well, I don't like to think too much about this. I don't like to think too much about it because I know that mental health is cyclic, and I never take for granted when I'm well, even though it's been now, how old am I? 8-9 years since I've had a particularly debilitating episode. I don't take that for granted at all, that there could be another one. Again,
it's like alcoholism. You need to regard yourself as that's it forever. You're recovering forever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And for this year, right now, I am medication free for the first time since I was 18. Completely free of medication. Now, I never thought that day would come, right?
I feel like saying congratulations, but I don't know if that's negative to people who are still
at the moment, exactly.
You seem happy. Good for you.
But that's not to say that medication's a bad thing. I want to stress that. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying that right now in my life, I'm not needing it. And that is a new thing for me. That may change, and almost certainly will change at some point in my life. I don't think too much about the future. Ask my financial advice. I should think much more about the future than I do. But I'm very, like a lot of people say to me, so I'm 40, right? And a lot of people are surprised by that when they've met me. Comedians that have known me, they're surprised that I'm 40. And I say it's because I feel like I lost my 20s. So I feel like I've got arrested development, like I'm 10 years younger than I am.
You get another go at your 30s.
So I get another go at my 30s. Unfortunately, my body clock and all the other things, my grey hair would attest differently. But that's why I think I have a slight immaturity to me, because there was that period of time when I just wasn't living a life, really. I was just not doing the stuff I should have been doing. So the future, who knows? I can only live for now. Right now, things are pretty good. I'll still find things to complain about and moan about, and because I'm a human being. But I'd say they're the best they've ever been. Right now. Ask me again in a fortnight. Who knows what's around the corner.
Let's talk some more about the writing.
Okay.
Because you're such a good writer. I know you and your system. Yeah, I remember you're a Pomodoro guy.
Pomodoro guy.
I think you were the first Pomodoro guy I spoke to.
I think I remember telling you about the Pomodoro. Yeah.
The Pomodoro method is you have a little timer, and you do 25 minutes work, and then you have 5 minutes off.
Yeah.
And you do loops of those over and over again.
Yeah.
And in that 5 minutes, you can look at Facebook and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
I find that my own use of Pomodoro is it's problematic because it's very hard to stick to a 5-minute break.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I just did my whole 25 minutes. Besides, obviously, looking at Facebook, if that's your go-to because you're in a cafe and you're on your own for entertainment, everything on it is literally algorithmically designed to try and snag you.
Absolutely.
I find that very hard. What I actually do now is I put a 20-minute timer on my phone just to remind me that I'm under pressure of time. And then as soon as it goes off, I go, oh, it's gone off, and I reset it, start again. And crack on with it. I try to do a bunch of those
without a break.
Don't have any breaks.
Yeah.
And then after you've done like 3 of them, you go, okay, I can have sort of 10 minutes. Isn't it?
I do still use the Pomodoro. So my writing method, if you can call it that, is I very quickly realised that I'm not one of those comics who can go, right, I'm going to write between 10 and 4 every day, and that's going to be what I do. Because, like I said before, I sit down at a blank screen or blank bit of paper, the tyranny of that, the kind of, I get panicked, and then once I panic and my anxiety rises, and then that's it, nothing's getting done for a week. Mm-hmm. Not just for that session, for a week. That's how it manifests in me. So what I have to do is I just collect ideas all the time. So I have on my phone, we've all got the notes section on our phone. That is just
what app
full
are you
of,
using for your notes?
I just use I've got an iPhone, so I just use the notes.
What if you lose your phone?
I use Evernote as well.
Okay.
So I see, but the notes app is synced with my
Oh, I didn't know it
MacBook.
could do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's synced with my MacBook. So I use that. I use a notebook. I like writing freehand. So I've always got a notebook and pen with 4-colour biro, if you must ask, because I'm obsessed with them. I used to have a boss who used to say, you could tell how stressed I am by how many pens are in my bag.
Nice.
The more stressed I am, the more pens. So I collect all these things so that when I do go, right, I've got time now to sit down and I've got starting points. I have to have
Yes. Yeah. I'm the same.
a thing to start with. Otherwise, the thought of having the whole universe to write about is too overwhelming and I can't do it.
And how does that tally with the demands of writing topical? Is it that you're giving yourself topical starting points?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't just write topical. So most of the stuff I write on the notes on my phone are just thoughts that occur to me, just little gems of thoughts or something you've seen or someone says something or, and friends are used to me now going, I'm going to write that down. Is that all right?
Yeah.
That's fine. The topical stuff tends to be, well, it depends what I'm doing. So I love doing things like Mock the Week or News Quiz because, hey, let's shatter some illusions here, but you know what the stories are going to be, right?
Sure.
So you know...
I should have said sure slightly faster. It sounded like I was surprised then.
Yeah. Really? What?
Oh,
What?
sure. What?
They've written the jokes in advance? What? I'm sure I'm not breaking any taboos by... So that already narrows down a field and that I can work with it. So I like to have a thing to work within. Go, okay, this news story's happened, write about that. And then I'll read every article in all the papers about that story and I'll go through and I'll pick out the bits that interest me. Because what I also think is if you're doing topical stuff, I want it to be very clear that it's in my voice if I'm delivering it. Because otherwise I might as well just read a list of jokes off Twitter. I don't write one-liners. I write jokes, but they're not one-liners and such. And I think the jokes I write are very much in my voice.
Yes.
Or, I like to think they are. So that's how I approach that sort of thing. There's other things that I find. So one of the things that I do now, which is probably the most terrifying job that I do, and I love it and hate it in equal measure, is I do Cutting Edge. I'm part of the Cutting Edge team at the Comedy Store. Mm-hmm. And if you don't know, Cutting Edge is the Tuesday night topical show at the Comedy Store. And it's been running for like 25 years or something. And most of the team have been doing it most of that time.
Sure.
So I'm a very new member of the team and I do it maybe once a month-ish. And it is so out of my comfort zone because you're delivering stuff to an audience that have come for stand-up. They know it's a topical show, but they're also expecting Comedy Store level stand-up.
Yes.
They're not expecting...
It's not a new material. It's not old rag.
Not a new material night,
Yep.
exactly. It's not, I'll just waffle till I get to something funny night. They want jokes, but they want jokes about things that happened in the news that day or that week, And that I find terrifying yet exhilarating when it works. It's like being an open spot again. It's that feeling of, I can't believe I got away with it. As soon as the show ends, I like, get me a glass of wine.
Yeah.
And, that real exhilaration that you've got away with it. It's the only way I can put it. But writing for that is quite hard because you've got all the news. So that day, if I'm doing Cutting Edge that evening, you're like, where do I start? And the producer will send you, because the guy who produces the show, John, he'll send you a list of things that might come up, but it's the audience that choose the topics. The audience on the night go, give me some material about this thing. And you just have to go and do it, and that's utterly terrifying. So you're trying to preempt what might come up, think of some jokes that you might be able to. It's also quite a good exercise in shoehorning.
Yeah, right.
If something comes up, you're like, oh, I can shoehorn that bit of material into that thing, or you can do that as well.
But you need to shoehorn it well enough because otherwise
they don't
it.
notice.
Yeah,
They're not stupid. They're like, hang on, that's not what we said the topic
Yeah,
was.
okay.
You have to be able to.
So then with both systems, you're accruing notes. If you're looking at topical stuff, you're underlining things. You read. I mean, I'm interested to hear, but in particular, that you read all of the papers.
Yeah.
So you're getting the tabloids and you're getting the broadsheets.
Yeah, I think that's important. To get all points of view, and I would never buy a copy of the Daily Mail. I always look at that online.
Yeah.
I have certain limits.
Still get advertising revenue, mate.
The Sun too. Even the Sun and the Times are both behind paywalls, but luckily when you do certain topical TV shows, they give you sign-ins, so I get to look at those for free. So I tend to look at them online. I'll buy the Guardian. I'll buy the I newspaper is quite good. What I find is quite good sometimes is if you've got a lot of stories, you just want little you want an overview, and while I can spend all day ploughing through the Guardian, at the end of it I've got too much information in my brain. Sometimes that little eye newspaper is quite good for just getting an outline of the stories, the salient points that you can then take off to where you want to take them. I like having the physical paper, some physical papers, because I like to highlight and underline, and I'm a girl who loves stationery.
Yeah,
right?
okay.
So any excuse to cut things out and stick things and underline things, and I'm very much from a real paper and pen world.
So you've got your notes, you've got the things that stood out.
Yep.
What happens next?
Okay, so my process is I'm very lucky in that we've got a 2-bedroom flat, so I've got a little study room, and I've bought, you could buy these from Staples, and they are the best thing I've ever bought as a writing comic, are these whiteboard sheets that are like static, so they stick to your wall.
Okay.
And you can get a sheet of 20 of them, costs about 20 quid. My wall in my study is covered in whiteboard sheets.
Oh, please, can you take a picture and send it to me when you get home?
Sure.
I would love to accompany this with that.
And I write on that. So I've got whiteboard markers, and I do diagrams, and I write on there. I do flowcharts.
And when you say you do flowcharts, what does that mean in terms of like you thinking of the idea?
If for example, I'm trying to think of a new story. I did a thing recently about policemen wearing cameras now.
Yes.
Right? So I would put camera on there and just free association, everything I think of to do with cameras, right? And then I think about policemen, think of free association, everything I can do to think of policemen. And then you can, it's a visual representation there in front of you. See, are there any funny links between what I've written there and what I've written there?
And you're writing these all out in big, thick marker pen on a great big white. I love it.
So I like to just look at it all at once, And then I might go, so one of the jokes I do is about how, Theresa May made loads of cuts to the police force, and now they have to wear cameras, so at least they can supplement their income on You've Been Framed, right?
Yes. Gotcha.
And that was just from that thing of going like video cameras and then police cuts and going, oh, You've Been Framed, and
money.
There's a link.
There's the link.
And it doesn't work for some. You know what it's like. Some jokes just fall in your head, fully formed, to the point where you go, well, someone must have done this before. And you Google it and ask everyone, has someone else done this? Has someone else done this? Because you can't quite believe that you've had that idea. And then other times you have to pull them kicking and screaming because you know it's there. And the other really important thing for me is, like, I find sitting in isolation with these thoughts does my head in. So I meet up with, for me, Michael Fabry, who's my best mate and a comedian. And we will meet up, and we don't write for each other. What we do is we just read out the ideas we've got, because then the other person will go,
you've missed a link there.
You missed that link between that. Or, well, do you remember you wrote that thing once but it never went anywhere? But that would fit into that, because we know each other's material and we know each other's voices, and that is invaluable. That's where it actually starts to then condense into something. So when we did Old Rope together, the new material night that you were at,
and Michael were there together.
Michael and I were there together. So I was with Tiffany, who runs it. I always say, can you put me and Michael on together? Because we will spend that day go, this is what I'm going to do tonight, this is what I'm going to do tonight, and just consolidating it together.
That's such a great idea.
Yeah, just because it's just to put it in someone else's head before you do it to an audience. It's just, if it's just an audience of one person, it's like, otherwise I don't trust it to go from my head to an audience without a filter.
So tell me then about refining that once that works, because something I noticed, and it's interesting, that kind of join the dots technique, that link technique. Is something I noticed. I was looking at one of your stand up for the week clips that's online.
Right.
It's about OAPs on drugs.
Right, yeah.
And literally, and I'm going to murder the stuff now, just on the notes, the amount of punchlines per second or per minute, whatever. When you're old, it's the best time to take drugs. It's not like you've got to get up early for work in the morning. Bang. You'll never have a problem finding a vein. Bang. You might not be able to heat a bungalow, but you could heat a teaspoon. Bang. Yeah. And I'm pointing out, she does not say bang at this point. Bang implies a big audience laugh. I don't think my nan's on cocaine, but she does knock out jumpers at an alarming rate. My nan couldn't be a dealer. She has trouble working one phone, let alone two. And it's just like wallop, 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 wallop. And every one of those was getting a laugh. Right. And a deserved laugh. Yeah. And you're changing it's almost like there's idea number one was, it's the best time to take drugs when you're old.
Yeah.
Here's 3 punchlines about that. Idea number 2, would I know if my own old person was on drugs?
Yeah.
Idea number 3, could my old person sell drugs?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's like, it changed the paradigm. It's like you're kind of, I never know whether people know what I mean by a paradigm because, as I said, I went to a wanky art school. You know what a paradigm is, right?
Yeah.
I think every time I visualize or talk about changing a paradigm, I always twisting a thing. It's like there's a window to the world and it's square, but if you twist it, it turns triangular, and if you twist it again, it turns circular.
Yeah.
That's kind of what a paradigm is.
And that's a boy brought up on Play School with those windows. Look at that.
Right. So you've got one sheet with camera and one sheet with police.
Yeah.
Have you then got another sheet or another kind of a mental overview of if I was a policeman, if someone I knew was a policeman, if policemen had always been like this, if aliens saw policemen?
Well, this is where something like, so yeah, I do try and, you sort of try and rinse it out, just go, is there anywhere else I can take this? Have I had other thoughts that relate to this? And that's where, so I use Evernote. I don't know if you know the application.
I know
Evernote.
it, but I don't like, I use Simple Note because it updates automatically. Evernote, I tried it once. I couldn't get in because unless you're online.
Oh, right.
I was
Yeah.
like, I'm a bit of
I'm so bloody in the Stone Ages when it comes to, I was just like, oh, I've heard about this one, I'll use that.
Yeah, sure.
But what I like about it is that it has a search function.
Yeah.
So all my notes eventually go into it. Mm-hmm. And then I can search. So I can go, if I'm writing about drugs, I put drugs in, and any ideas, any thoughts I've had about, and they might be thoughts that I couldn't do anything with before, but now suddenly they fit into this new idea I've had.
Yes.
So, and you could go, well, I can take it that way with that. So that's one tool. That's one thing that's said about this. I do sort of pile on punchlines, but I think that is almost a symptom of my insecurity. Right?
Yes. Okay.
Is that I don't trust that one laughs enough. So I better have another one just in case they don't laugh at that one. And then they might not laugh at that one. So I better make sure there's something else coming just in case. And I do, I mean, that clip.
Is that, I just want to challenge you on that. Is that true that it's a symptom of your insecurity, or is it just good craft? It's just having a lot of punchlines.
I don't know. I think it maybe a bit of both. I don't know. I just feel like, because there are some comics who can really take their time getting to a punchline, and when they get to the punchline, it's worth it. Right?
Yes.
I'm not sure my punchlines are worth it, so I get to them as quickly as I bloody can.
Yes.
So I think it's a different skill. I'm somebody who, if I'm on stage and they haven't laughed for 20 seconds, even though I haven't said anything funny in 20 seconds because it's a 20-second setup, I start getting anxious.
Okay, yeah.
So it's almost a self-protection thing to go. So sometimes I'll build in an extra gag on the way to a bigger gag because I need to have a laugh on the way. I know there's a big laugh coming, but if I don't have one on the way, I'll start losing faith before I get there.
And it's just that neuroses serves you really well, because why not have 10 punchlines instead of one?
Yeah.
What string to your bow that you don't currently have would you kill for?
Oh my God, so many. I think one I would kill for is to take bigger risks. What I love about, so James Acaster is somebody I'll take as an example, because I knew James when he was an open spot, because I used to run this little gig in Brighton and he used to come and do it. And he was doing what all open spots do at that point, And then I watched him grow into this. And what James Acaster did was worked his arse off. Like, he was forever.
I don't think I've ever known a harder working.
Never known a harder work. Because he used to stay at my house if he was gigging, down that way, down in Brighton. And from the minute he woke up, he had his notebook out and was working on every train journey, he would listen back to every gig he would record and listen back to and learn from his mistakes and hone and work out what it was he wanted to say. And what he didn't do was ever apologise for who James Acaster was. And eventually, because he had been going long enough, he got the skills to bring absolutely every audience member on board. But what he didn't do was fall down that crack that a load of us fall down, I think, where there's a crack between just doing what all open spots are doing and finding your voice. And the crack that you can fall between is being so scared that the audience isn't going to like you that you never take any risks. So you just end up doing the same thing all the time. And James danced across that crack by not giving a shit if the audience would, because he knew where it was going. He knew what he was trying to do, and he knew that eventually he'd have the skills to do it. And that's exactly what happened. And now you can put James Acaster in any room and that audience will come on board with him, even though he's doing something so different to other acts. And he's so unique and one of the most exciting acts to watch. And to watch him from an open spot grow into that is extraordinary.
So you feel that I agree with all of that.
Yeah.
But it's the taking risks thing. You wish you'd take more risks.
It's the praise addict in me. Because to take a risk means you have to go on stage in front of a room full of people and try something that they probably won't like, just to see if it works. And the praise addict in me doesn't like that, because you're going to come off and no one's going to say well done to you. Oh no. So I would like to take more risks. I would like to be more of a risk taker.
But do you suppose that you won't do that?
I probably won't.
Yeah, that's
I
lovely.
probably won't.
It's great. The kind of the self-management that you have is just like, wouldn't that be nice? Not going to worry about that. I'm going to get on working hard and writing jokes and performing them.
Yeah, because it's what I feel is in my control. I'm a control freak over my own brain, I guess, and so if I need to sort of have as much control as I can over what's going to happen when I step on a stage. Like, there's acts that go, I don't know what I'm going to do tonight. I'll see what I feel like when I get out there. And I'm like, you mad? Like, I have to know what the first joke is going to come out of my mouth. Now, I may, on stage, once you start gauging an audience reaction, you might go, right, I'm not going to do that bit. They're going to prefer this bit.
Yes. That's a different thing, though, isn't it?
But that's a different thing.
Yeah, I've had a thought.
Yeah. But I have never been on stage and had a thought pop in my head and go, I'm going to say that just to see what happens. Sure, I have, if I'm reacting to something that's happened in the room.
Sure, of course.
That's a different thing. If you're having to react to a heckler or to whatever's happening in the room, then you do. You get that little adrenaline spike that helps you do that.
I'm just thinking of having done, I did the previews recently, this thing called Hell Week. It was only 3 shows. It was like me trying to write a new show. Now that there's a baby, not all that so much time to do the big writing sessions. There's a baby. So I was, and there was a lot of those moments, and I use them a lot on stage anyway. And that rush of literally thinking of a new idea or a thing you once thought was funny ages ago and never turned into a joke, and saying, I think I'm going to say this now. And then I did a bit about liking the little robot that diffuses the bombs.
Oh yeah, you did it at rope. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So I did it at the Hell, and I came and did that. And it was it's not funny on paper. Nothing about it is funny. And that rush of like that thrill of like, I'm just gonna fucking do it. Yeah. And it died at Hell Week, and then it kind of worked at Old Rope, right? Yeah. And now I'm like, well, how does that fit into my act?
What do I do with that?
Oh, great. I took a risk and now there it is. I've got to think about a robot that doesn't go anywhere.
And the only time I'm happy taking a risk, I think, is when I'm MCing. If I'm MCing, I don't mind so much because I feel like the pressure is slightly off. Not in terms of, you still got to be funny and you still got a job to do. But as
you
an
get
MC,
so many bites of the cherry.
Yeah, yes. Exactly. And you've got that room to, like, particularly if it's a reaction to something, if you're chatting to someone in the audience, say, and they say something or they say a job they do, and you're like, I had a thought about that once that I never wrote a joke about. Why don't you say it now? Because it's a conversation. It's not a piece of material.
Yes, I see.
Then I'll try it. And if they laugh, then I might go away and go, right, time to work that bit out.
Absolutely. And that's you can see the strength of that method of working because you are a stone cold reliable act. Even years ago, not just a few years ago, but several years ago, if someone had said, can I put Angela on to open, middle, close, whatever, you're the sort of act about whom when people go, oh yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, okay, couple of quick fire ones to before we wrap up. Some of these are new.
Right.
Which comic would it be most narratively satisfying if they killed you?
Oh my God, Michael Fabry.
Yeah, I mean, it would, wouldn't it? That's just too easy a question for you, isn't it? Wouldn't it? It would need to be.
Absolutely. It's come close a few times.
It would be a suicide pact.
We have such a brother-sister sort of relationship in that we bicker like a brother and sister bicker. But if anyone else said anything negative to me about Michael Fabry, I'd punch them in the face. Like that's what our relationship's like.
And what elements of that relationship are so particularly suited to working together? Why is it that you and he are such a good
I think it's because we don't pull any punches. So if I think he's had an idea and it's shit and it's not going to work, I can tell him it's shit and it's not going to work. And vice versa. So you know what it's like, sometimes you're just like, somebody says to you an idea in a green room, I've had this, what do you think? You're like, that could work. Knowing in your head going, you insane, that's never going to work. Whereas with Michael, I'll go, what? I don't get it. We could quite happily say that to each other. And I think that's the valuable thing, is that you have to be able to say, if you want to work with someone like that, you have to be able to tell them and know that it's okay to tell them if you think a bit is shit.
Finally then, what would be, and you can interpret this however you like, what would you have engraved on your comedy gravestone?
On my comedy gravestone, I would have engraved, she had a go. Like, that's all I could, this ride I'm on, and I call it a ride, right? It's like, we never know when it's going to end, right? It could end at the moment, I make my living out of writing comedy. That to me is more than I ever hoped would happen, and you sort of have ambitions, and sometimes you can drive yourself mad looking at what other people are doing and should I be doing that and why aren't I doing this, that or the other. You go, the bottom line is you've made it, right? You're making a living as a comedian. That should be enough. So you had a go. She had a go, paid off. Whatever happens next is a bonus.
Thanks, Angela.
Thanks for having me, Stu. It's been fun.
So that was Angela Barnes. Thank you very much to Angela for coming along. You can find her stuff online. She does loads and loads on Radio 4, so listen out there. You can probably search her on iPlayer as well as on YouTube and all the other places you'd expect to find some stuff. So look out for Angela Barnes. And thank you to Daryl for the editing. Thank you to all of my logging legends, Olivia Phipps, Matt Hoss and Emily Crosby, the current team of, usual suspects. They're not suspects, they definitely did it. So thank you to those three heroes. And thanks to you for listening. If you'd care to make a donation, it's comedianscomedian.com/donate. If you would like to support the show, and if you would like to support the show non-financially, you can leave me a positive rating on iTunes, all that blah, 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 blah. You can tweet me at ComComPod, email me info@comedianscomedian.com. There's still room for those people who would like to be part of the cavalry and help put up posters in your places of work in any towns that I'm coming to on tour. And you can email me info@comedianscomedian.com with the subject line cavalry. If you'd like to help out, thank you very much to those of you who've done that for me already and got in touch to say so. I will inscribe your names in something, but privately. You'll never see it. So that's all of that. No post-amble this week because of reasons, and I might explain those reasons in more detail another time, or we might just put it down to a complete running out of time. But that's that for now. I'm off to do the second leg of some tour support I've been doing for young Mr. Jack Whitehall, who has been... we did the New Oxford Theatre last night, which in 2 shows we did a matinee and an evening performance. I was just doing a little support slot at the top in these gorgeous, completely jam-packed full, enormous 3-tiered rooms, and it occurred to me afterwards that those 2 support slots I performed to approximately as many people as I did throughout the whole of my Edinburgh run this year. So what's fascinating about that, and we've got some more coming up, so I might sort of clue you in on some of those soon. We've got 1 or 2 really exciting ones, and I feel very lucky to be doing that. And also, it's so funny seeing the difference between the public and private faces of the show. You know, that line of the curtain in a huge venue like that. In front of it, you've got, literally thousands, or 1.7, that's plural, isn't it? Thousands of fans being all giddy and excited. And then behind the curtain, you've got a bloke and a couple of other people. You've got like a tour manager and a driver and someone from management. And then it's just a guy on stage. A very, very talented and energetic, very funny guy. But it's just a guy. It really reminded me of all of those moments when you play at a club or you see a comic at a club and the opening of the club is this huge kind of, the lights are spinning or disco mode, or there's like searchlight things, there's a siren, there's a huge pumping anthemic track played, and then a bloke walks out. And I'm sorry, I've accidentally made that gendered, many apologies. A person walks out. It is equally hilarious either way, whether it's a man or a woman. It's just so much kind of dun dun da, and then yep, here I am. So it's going to be really interesting seeing how that progresses as we move to some much bigger venues, and I will be keenly watching from the sidelines to see how these big arena touring guys fill the space, and how that kind of changes performance and what have you. And I think I'm fairly certain I can wheedle Jack onto the podcast before too long. So look out for that. Not a guarantee, but I think he's up for it. Lovely guy, very funny guy. If you haven't already booked your tickets to see him at some of the biggest places it's possible to see people, then I should get in quick. That's all for now. I will speak to you next week with an exciting American. I've yet to decide which one to release, but one of the exciting Americans. Speak to you soon.